In the winter of 1945, in the burned-out Ueno district of Tokyo, a former schoolteacher named Michiko Endo fed her 2 sons for 11 straight weeks on rations that worked out to under 800 calories a day. She stretched what little flour she had with whatever else she could grind into it, and what she made is number 7 on this list. A few blocks away, a demobilized soldier traded his last pair of boots for 3 tins of something stamped in English he couldn't read. That's number 4, and it kept his mother alive that spring. If this list makes you sit up a little straighter, hit subscribe. There's more of this waiting. Let's start the countdown. Let's start with the one nearly every household in the city could still get their hands on. 10. Rice gruel stretched with barley husks. Rice, barley husks, water, salt if there was any. A small handful of rice went into boiling water along with a larger scoop of ground barley husks. Stirred until it thickened into something between a soup and a porridge. It smelled of scorched grain and tasted mostly of water, with just enough rice underneath to remind you what rice used to taste like on its own. Tokyo's official rice ration had fallen to about 2 go a day per person by late 1945, roughly 300 grams, barely 1 real bowl, so families cut it with husks meant for livestock to stretch it across 3 meals instead of 1. A bowl that then still had to be shared evenly, and in most households, it was. 9. Roasted acorn. Coffee, acorns, water. Gathered from park grounds, shelled, roasted in a dry pan until they went dark, then ground fine and steeped in hot water like coffee grounds. It came out bitter and faintly nutty, smelling more of scorched wood than coffee, but it was hot, and hot counted for something that winter. Real coffee had vanished from Tokyo years earlier, and, when it could be found on the black market by 1946, cost close to a week's wages for an ounce. Acorns from Ueno Park were free, which made them the only coffee most families would drink for another 2 years. Drinking something bitter and calling it coffee anyway was its own small refusal to give up the shape of an ordinary morning. 8. Diluted powdered milk. Powdered milk from relief supplies, water. A spoonful went into a cup of water and got stirred until it dissolved, then watered down further so 1 tin could last longer than it was meant to. It came out chalky and thin, faintly sweet, nothing like fresh milk, but warm enough in the mouth to feel like something real. Relief organizations began distributing powdered milk to households with young children in 1946. Rationed to about 1 tin a month per family, so mothers learned to add a little more water each week to make it reach all 30 days. Stretching 1 tin that far meant a child got something white and warm every morning, even if it was mostly water by the 4th week. Here's the part nobody talks about. In a city where whole blocks had burned down to their foundations, a kitchen that still worked at all was its own kind of miracle. And one that had gone quiet said something nobody wanted to say out loud. Some mothers set a bowl down at a place that used to be someone's, out of habit more than hope, because setting a full table was easier than admitting who wasn't sitting at it anymore. That's what a firebombed city does to a meal. It doesn't just shrink the portions. It changes who the portions are for. Number 7 is what one mother made when there wasn't much left in the house to stretch. 7. Soybean meal cakes. Soybean meal, a little flour if there was any, water. The meal got mixed with whatever flour was on hand, formed into small flat cakes by hand, and pan-fried dry since there usually wasn't oil to spare either. It came out dense and gritty, faintly bitter, holding together just enough not to fall apart before it reached your mouth. This is what Michiko Endo made to stretch her family's flour that winter. Soybean meal had been sold as a livestock feed before the shortage turned it into a human staple, and a sack of it cost as little as 15 cents that year, against several yen for a sack of real flour on the rare weeks flour could be found at all. Turning what used to be feed for animals into a cake for her sons was, for her, simply what a Tuesday required. 6. Fish head broth. Fish heads and bones, the parts a fishmonger used to throw away. Water, whatever vegetable scraps were around. The heads and bones went into a pot and simmered for hours until the water turned cloudy and rich, then got strained or left whole depending on how many mouths needed feeding that night. It smelled of the sea and tasted deeply savory, despite having almost no actual meat in it at all. Tokyo's fish markets were some of the first businesses to reopen after the surrender, and a full bag of heads and bones might cost only a few sen, while the fillets themselves went to whoever could pay 10 times that. A broth made from what nobody else wanted still tasted, that year, like something worth sitting down for. 5. Foraged dandelion greens from bomb craters. Wild dandelion greens, water. Picked from the edges of bomb craters and cleared lots where nothing else had been planted yet. Rinsed of soot and grit, then boiled briefly to take the worst of the bitterness out. It tasted bitter and green, a little gritty no matter how carefully it was washed. Central Tokyo was still cratered and half cleared a full year after the surrender, and the weeds that grew fastest in that broken ground were the first green things some children had eaten in months. A dandelion pulled from a bomb crater and boiled for dinner was proof that something could still grow where almost nothing else had. Ask anyone who cooked through that first post-war Tokyo winter, and they'll tell you the same thing happened to them at some point. There's a specific kind of tired that comes from boiling water for a meal you already know won't be enough, day after day, with no date circled on any calendar for when that might change. It would have been easier, some weeks, to stop, to let hunger make the decision instead of standing over a pot for an hour to make something out of almost nothing. Families kept doing it anyway, across a city that still smelled of ash, because stopping felt like its own kind of giving up. Number 4 is what showed up every so often to make that choice a little easier. 4. Canned American surplus meat, GI rations. Canned meat from American military surplus, water or broth to stretch it further. The tin got opened straight, heated in a pan if there was fuel to spare, and portioned thin across a whole family instead of eaten whole by one person. It came out salty and fatty, richer than almost anything else on this list, a taste some people hadn't had in years. This is the tons the demobilized soldier from the start of this video traded his boots for. Occupation era black markets ran on goods exactly like this, and a single tin could trade for nearly a week's worth of rice on the street. A can of meat traded for the shoes off your feet tells you what a family was willing to give up to taste something whole again. 3. Wheat flour, bread, cut with sawdust, wheat flour, sawdust, or wood pulp filler, water. Flour and filler were mixed together to make the flour go further, kneaded into a rough dough, then baked or steamed until it held its shape. It came out dry and dense, tasting faintly of wood, hard to get down without something to drink alongside it. Flour was so scarce in 1946 Tokyo that some bakeries stretched every sack with fillers at ratios as high as 1 part sawdust to 2 parts flour, just to keep a ration line from turning people away empty-handed. Calling it bread at all, when it was mostly filler and hope, was an act of stubbornness as much as baking. 2. Ration line steamed sweet potato, nothing else. Steamed whole over water until soft enough to eat with a spoon, skin and all, with nothing added because there was nothing to add. It came out warm and faintly sweet, plain in a way that felt almost like relief after everything else on this list. Sweet potatoes became one of the few reliable staples in post-war Tokyo because they grew in poor, bomb-cleared soil where rice never could. And a family might stand in a ration line 2 or 3 hours for a single potato per person. Waiting 3 hours for one potato and still calling it a good day says something no statistic ever could. Somewhere in Tokyo that year, a father stood in a ration line for 3 hours for a single sweet potato and counted it a good day. Nobody praised him for it. No one wrote his name down anywhere. He went home, split the potato into pieces small enough for 4 people, and called it dinner anyway. That's the whole story behind most of what's on this list. Not resourcefulness, not resilience treated as some kind of virtue, just a plain refusal to let hunger make the next decision for his family. Number 1 is what it looked like when people broke the rules to keep that refusal going. 1. Black market, watery udon. Wheat flour noodles, water, whatever broth scraps were available. The noodles were bought or bartered for on the black market, then boiled in a broth stretched mostly with water so it would serve more people than the noodles alone ever could. The noodles came out chewy in a broth that tasted more of salt than anything else, but it was hot, and it filled the stomach in the moment that mattered. Black markets sprang up around nearly every train station in Tokyo within weeks of the surrender, and a bowl of noodles there might cost 10 times the official ration price. Money families found anyway, because eating something that tasted like an ordinary meal mattered almost as much as the calories in it. A bowl of noodles bought against the law was still, in every way that counted, a family sitting down to dinner. Pick one of these, just one. Make it this week. Sit at an actual table, not the couch, and set a place like someone's joining you. Because in a way, they are. Eat it slow enough to taste what it is you're really tasting. Tell me in the comments, Was it the fish head broth or the black market udon that stayed with you longest? These meals were never about nutrition, and they were never about being resourceful. They were about people refusing to stop being people. That's what they still mean. That's the only word that matters here.